to be wild.
Okay.
And we're back. Oh, I like your nails.
Oh, thanks.
I just noticed that. But you're back.
Hi.
Hey, Mom.
Hi, Daff.
Every
Every time I come out here, I'm allergic to this, I think.
Allergic to podcasting?
No, I love it.
Even though we have one real fan, finally.
No, we have two real fans because we had that other guy before.
The other guy before.
The guy that messaged us and told us that he loved it.
Oh, yeah.
And I could look him up.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm few and far between on the socials.
Yeah, same. But yes, we have two actual fans now.
Woo! No, but we do appreciate it.
Yeah,
It feels nice just to know that we're not just like listening to ourselves back. Like somebody else is actually listening to us.
Yes, we appreciate that you appreciate what we do because it's a lot of work and it's also a lot of fun.
Yeah. Work hard, play hard.
Yeah, researching is awesome.
Yeah.
Because, man, do you find some shit?
Yeah. Yeah, no shit. All right. All right.
All right.
You came back to Australia today, I am.
Was that an Australian accent? I'm not really sure.
I don't think so. I don't think it really was. But here we go. Oh, no, it wasn't.
No, don't. Don't. Are you ready for my disturbing fact?
I am ready.
And I have chosen another disgusting thing for you.
Oh, Ema.
Oh, my God. That's
All right.
an inside thing.
It's not really. It's
Well,
H2O.
if you watch fucking H2O from what year, 1982 or some shit?
No, it's not that old. It's like early 2000s, but it's not that old.
Yeah, okay.
The original H2O with the chicks who were also in like the Vampire Diaries. They've also been in that. There's Emma, Clear,
which is Emma.
Ricky.
Wow, you sound like you're being a dick.
I love it.
Should cut it off.
No, I don't think you should.
Okay.
No, Emma, Cleo, and Ricky. I love it.
See, I didn't even get Cleo. I thought you were saying Claire.
It's like how they say it.
I know, because they have great accents.
I love their accents.
Which you are not mastering.
I go crazy for an Australian accent. I love the fuck out of the Aussies.
Well, you are not mastering the...
No one ever said I was good at it. I'm fucking...
I just want to reiterate the fact that you are not indeed good at it, in case you're wondering.
Yeah, no,
but since no one ever told you that you were good at it, I guess you know you're not.
Yeah, no one's ever been like, wow, you have some mad accent skills.
Yeah,
it's never been an art that I've possessed.
That's not a thing.
All right, sorry. What do you have for your nastiness today?
I don't know if you knew that about this. This is kind of a common misconception that I didn't know about, but I guess a lot of people...
I'm scared.
A lot of people believe that this is true, and it might be true to a point, but probably it isn't true. But the rest of it is going to be true. Okay, so here we go.
Can you just like spit it out?
I'm going. So the ancient Romans believed that urine, both human and animal, would make their teeth whiter and keep them from decaying. So they used it as mouthwash, and they also mixed it with pumice to make toothpaste.
Ew.
In fact, urine was so effective that it was used as toothpaste and mouthwashes up until the 1700s. That's what some historians believe. However, some historians challenge that.
As they should, because that's fucking nasty.
And say that it's misleading. It has misleading implications of saying that they actually used it for mouthwash and toothpaste. And there's an ancient Roman poet whose name is Catullus, and he actually mocked someone for brushing their teeth with urine and using it as mouthwash. And also it says that it's not, that he said, the poet said, it is not a Roman trait. And in other words, cleaning one's teeth with urine-based mouthwash and toothpaste was an un-Roman act, and any Roman doing so should be publicly ridiculed, which is also not cool. But anyway, so moving on from the urine mouthwash / toothpaste, maybe not.
Okay.
But again, like I said, some historians think it's true and other historians don't think it's true. However, what we do know about urine is that
However, what we do know about urine is that it's nasty.
Besides it being urine.
And some people drink it religiously, like their morning pee every day, and that's
gross.
just so
Or
nasty.
put it on a towel and put it on their face. But that's not...
Ew, I've never heard that before. That's gross.
Yeah, but I'm not...
I remember on the season of the challenge, on one of the finals, they had to eat horse urine fermented eggs.
Ugh. Okay, well, anyway, so what we do know about urine and being used in ancient times is that urine was considered to be a valuable commodity because it contains an important array of minerals and chemicals such as phosphorus and potassium, and it's a rich source of urea, a nitrogen-based organic compound. And when it's stored for long periods of time, the urea in stale urine decays to produce ammonia, a chemical that many use in household cleaners today, although it's actual ammonia and not urine as far as I know.
Noted.
But
they basically, all the water supply that's returned, they evaporate all the water from it and leave the ammonia.
Leave the urine to ferment and turn into... But
Yeah.
anyway, so in ancient Rome, vessels for collecting urine were commonplace on the streets, and passersby would be encouraged to relieve themselves into them. When the containers of piss were full, urine, sorry.
Piss.
Piss. When the containers of urine were full, then they would take it to a phalanca, which is a laundry. And then the stale urine would be diluted with water in a large vat, into which then dirty clothes would be added. And then a laundry worker would then stand in the tub of urine and agitate the clothes with their feet, similar to the way that a modern washing machine works today.
I feel like I want to puke.
Yeah, it's something.
That's disgusting.
It is
Why
something.
do you do this?
Because it's something. So anyway, so even after the use of soap became more widespread later periods of time, urine was still known by the name chamber lye because it was collected from chamber pots, and it continued to be used as a pre-soaking treatment for tough stains.
Ew.
And so, yeah, there you go. Urine not only got clothes cleaner, but it also made the colors brighter because like nowadays we use dye and stuff. And back then they used seeds and leaves and berries and stuff like that. And
They used natural elements.
yeah, such as urine to keep the color from fading out of their clothes as well.
That's so gross.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
But I
So-
mean, actually, I guess, a lot of things that we think are nasty today are not things that were considered nasty back when.
no. So urine
People
was...
did not have a gag reflex like they do today. They are not sensitive like they are today.
Well, maybe they just didn't have a choice but not to be.
Yeah.
So urine was so important to the textile industry of the 16th century England that casks of it, an estimated amount equivalent to a stream of about 1,000 people urinating for an entire year, were shipped across the country to Yorkshire to be mixed with alum to form an even stronger mordant than just urine alone to get out really tough stains.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So anyway, there you go. There's
The traveling pee.
your urine fact. Could you imagine, aside from just using urine to clean your clothes, which we actually use something called urine out because we have an occasional mishap having so many animals in our house that, sometimes stuff happens.
Yes,
and
yes, fingers pointing that my dog.
No. I'm not even saying your dog. I was going to say like dog beds and stuff get marked and peed on. All right, well, there you go. That's your disturbing fact about urine, and actually disgusting fact. I think I've moved from disturbing to disgusting, which I find easier to find disgusting things than disturbing things.
Oh, see, I find it easier to find like fun, cool, weird, like you wouldn't think it's true, but it's true kind of facts.
You think that using urine to wash your clothes sounds like it might not be true?
No, I mean, something I've never thought about, but I mean, perhaps it could be. All right, you want to hear part 3?
I do want to hear part 3. I need some resolution, and hopefully it's not as fucking sad as part 2.
I mean, it's still sad, but different
Okay.
because, people still died.
Yeah.
So where we left off was Martin Bryant had gone on a crazy killing spree, right? He had killed 34 people in just 22 minutes over the course of 2 hours.
That's fucking crazy.
Yeah. Like his total killing time was 22 minutes over the span of a 2-hour space
Yeah.
with the 34 people. The scene of Port Arthur where he committed the massacre, or at least the most part of the massacre,
Mm-hmm.
it's referred to as the Port Arthur Massacre,
Okay.
was like absolutely insane. Like there were helicopters flighting people to hospitals, like rapidly trying to
Flighting them?
flying people to hospitals trying to save their lives. He had injured 23 people in total over this entire massacre as well. So there's a lot of injury aside from death happening here too, of people being like in the ICU, lives trying to be saved.
Right.
So they're
like
not another fatality.
That one guy that you said that had to have like several surgeries. And,
yeah.
Yeah. And
Horrible.
I'm sure he wasn't the only one.
Yep. I mean, yeah, it was so many people. So people really fought hard for their lives here.
Yeah.
So he had Glenn Pears handcuffed to a stairrail where we left off, which was by the Martins' bodies, right? At the Seascape Cottage. If you haven't listened to part 1 or part 2, I recommend you do that before you come here because you're not going to understand what's happening. So yeah, there's my recap.
Yeah. And part 1 was lighter hearted. Part 2 is devastatingly, heart-wrenchingly terrible and
Fucked
horrific.
up. But this part, we're going to get some justice.
Sounds good.
But it's also going to be really sad.
Okay.
Because of obviously the events that happened in last episode.
Mm-hmm.
So, right. Remember, Glenn Pears was the guy that he had taken to Seascape. He had held him hostage. He'd made him get into the back of the car, the trunk.
Yeah, he was the
In
one
the-
and
in the
only
stolen-
hostage that was taken.
Yeah, in the stolen BMW. Remember? He stole that BMW from those 4 people that he had killed.
Mm-hmm.
He had handcuffed him to the stair rail, which was by the Martins' bodies, within the Seascape Cottage. And then, remember, he started this massacre on April 28th, 1996, at about noon, or a little sooner than noon, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that's like when the first kills happened, was
Yeah,
at
I
like
think you said it was like 11:45, yeah.
at Seascape, the owners of Seascape. So he had gotten back to Seascape with Glenn Pears around 2 p.m. And remember, there were the cops who were responding to the calls of the cars being shot at on the road that he had targeted and like got them basically trapped into a ditch because every time they would move, he would fire. So around 2:10, Martin had received a call from a woman who was working at the ABC network, which is like a news source. She was trying to get information about the Port Arthur shootings and like collect it from local businesses.
Oh, so she called the inn.
She called the Seascape, yep.
Gotcha. Whoa.
Yeah, the Seascape Cottage, trying to get information from local businesses about everything that was going on and like if they were like helping people with refuge or what was going on, right?
That's coincidental and trippy.
Yeah, as fuck. So he called himself Jamie to the woman on the phone. He said he answered several questions before he threatened to kill Glenn Pears if she called again. So we went from like answering questions to being like, I'm going to kill this guy, by the way.
BTW.
He's going to be dead if you don't stop asking questions.
I'm not
and if
actually
you call
Jamie.
again. Yeah. So then he called the local police station. His call was answered by the girlfriend, I guess, of one of the police officers that he had like targeted and was in the ditch from earlier. He told her that her boyfriend was okay. And he also referred to himself as Jamie in that moment. And then at about 9 p.m., like special task force, they're called the Special Operations Group of the Tasmania Police Department, had arrived at the cottage, like in the area. So after 8 hours of the of the policeman being in the ditch.
Like a standoff-ish?
What do you mean, a standoff-ish?
Well, it's not really
They like didn't make it
because
there.
they couldn't move, but he wouldn't let them go. And,
yeah, they were in the ditch for 8 hours.
Yeah.
After 8 hours, they were finally like rescued by the special ops. But I don't know why the special ops weren't there sooner. Maybe because they were dealing with everything that was happening at the port.
Maybe.
And it was just like, okay, he has these hostages. Like, at least these officers can see that, like, he's not leaving.
Well, and did they know that it was the Port Arthur gunman at that point?
I don't know. I would assume so because he was answering questions, right?
Okay, yeah. Because I was thinking that maybe they were, like, holding that area down in case that person came back. Like, they didn't realize that that person was the person at the Seascape.
I don't know.
Okay, I'm just guessing, which is probably not cool.
Well, it was all connected later. Like, the order of events was all connected later.
Obviously.
That's not really relevant, though. I mean, like...
Okay, sorry.
Well, no, we're going in order because of how it's been connected.
Okay, gotcha.
We're going in order of how it's been pieced together in the past.
Okay, gotcha.
But anyway, then the special ops people began negotiations with Martin, who's also on the phone with the special ops group referring to himself as Jamie.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know what's up with that. So the team, they refused to open fire at the cottage, at the like guest house, right? Because they didn't want to hit the 3 hostages at that point, they thought that the Martins were still alive.
Okay.
They weren't aware that Nolene or Sally, right? She's called both, and David.
Mm-hmm.
They were just believed to be captives at the time. And then obviously Glenn Pears they knew was in there.
Mm-hmm.
So it was believed, though, that during the negotiations, or possibly sometime before, that Martin had killed Glenn Pears. He was 35 years old. And remember, he was in a relationship with Zoe Hall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they thought that those people were alive inside, right? But they don't really know what time exactly he was killed at
Mm-hmm.
because he was also shooting down at the cops in the ditch, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
there was just gunshots going off, so couldn't really pinpoint.
Gotcha.
But anyway, in an attempt to escape from the inn, I don't know why I call it the inn, it's because we watch Gilmore Girls.
Well, wasn't it called the Seascape Inn?
No, it's called the Seascape Cottage.
Oh, well, fuck.
It was a bed and breakfast.
Get it together, Rory.
I know, right? We are Lorelai and Rory.
Yes. And
kind of
after we're done
frightening.
here, we're going to Luke's
Yeah,
for
basically.
some coffee.
Yeah, no shit. I could totally go for some coffee right now, but that's neither here nor there because it's 7:30 at night. So again, in an attempt to escape, he started a fire.
Okay.
I don't know exactly what time he started the fire, but this standoff was 18 hours.
Jeez.
And so on April 29th, he was, with this fire, like taunting the police. Oh, come and get me. I'm going to die in here if you don't come and get me. You gotta come and get me. So on April 29th, Hank Timmerman, who was a special ops commander, he said he set the place on fire and consequently set himself on fire as well. His clothes as well were burning and he came running out on fire. So we had to extinguish him as well as arrest him. So this dumbass, he literally set himself on fire, which is kind of fucking comical.
Yeah, I'm
Right,
shaking
I'm
my
like-
head because
I'm like, this is like the one like little, this is where I feel like a sick sense of justice. I'm like, haha, fucker, you set yourself on fire.
right, you're stupid.
Yeah, you're an idiot. You set yourself on fire. He burnt his back and his butt.
Good, so he couldn't sit down.
Not comfortably, anyway. Yeah, suck on that. He was taken to the Royal Hobart Hospital where he was treated. He was heavily guarded. It's funny. I read this. I didn't put this in my notes, but I guess I should have because I'm about to tell you anyway. But I read this that two people had applied for guard jobs to try and get retribution on him.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Although it's bad, but I said I love it and I mean it.
Yeah, I understand that
Sorry.
feeling. They're like, let us take matters into our own hands.
Yeah, I know.
We are the justice system.
vigilante justice. Although I don't agree with it, I think it's wrong. Sometimes I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I agree.
Especially if you know this guy is guilty. Like, why waste everybody's money and time on a trial?
Yeah, exactly.
Just call it.
So while he was awaiting trial, he was examined by court-appointed psychiatrist Ian Sale, who believed that Martin, quote, could be regarded as having shown a mixture of conduct disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity, and a condition known as Asperger's syndrome.
Gotcha.
And then remember Paul Mullen, who we mentioned a few episodes earlier?
Mm-hmm.
He was hired by Martin Bryant's legal counsel. He said he had found that he was socially and intellectually impaired. He was the one that he said that we mentioned earlier that Martin told him that like there was no sexual relationship with Helen Harvey,
Mm-hmm.
that it was just purely a friendship, that like she understood him and they got each other, but it
Mhm.
wasn't crossing the line at all.
Right. It wasn't an intimate relationship. It was just a very close friendship.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. Or physically intimate.
Yeah, physically intimate.
Personally intimate, but not physically.
Yeah, so that's who Paul Mullen is, just to bring it full circle again. So his findings also said that he didn't display any signs of schizophrenia or a mood disorder. And basically, this is a quote by Dr. Mullen. Though Mr. Bryant was clearly a distressed and disturbed young man, he was not mentally ill. So that was a finding.
All right.
Yep. And in an examination after the massacre, forensic psychiatrist Ian Joblin found that Martin had to be borderline mentally disabled at least
Mm-hmm.
because he tested with an IQ of 66, which is an equivalent to an 11-year-old.
Okay. Gotcha.
And from the moment he was captured, he was continually like wanting to know how many people he had killed.
Like in a happy way?
Yeah, like he was impressed by what he had done.
What a fucker.
And so Martin, he's like provided conflicting and confusing stories about what happened
Mhm.
when he killed the 35 people at the, infamous Port Arthur site, the
Mhm.
massacre. Because this is famous. This This is the biggest massacre in Australian history.
Yeah.
The biggest public mass shooting.
Yeah.
I guess they're all public, right? I don't know why I said public. The biggest mass shooting. So during some of his interviews, he described the details of shooting from his own point of view to the police, but said that the descriptions were very altered and that he was either lying or was mentally incapable of accurately recalling the details.
Okay.
So we don't really know.
So he was either embellishing or just didn't remember.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. It's alleged that it could have been his desire for attention that led him to do this, because apparently he told a neighbor once, quote, "I'll do something that will make everyone remember me."
That'll do it.
That'll do it, right? And again, Paul Mullen, he said that, this is a quote from him, he followed Dunblane. His planning started with Dunblane. Before that, he was thinking about suicide, but Dunblane and the early portrayal of the killer, Thomas Hamilton, changed everything. Are you familiar with that?
I am not.
Okay, well, we're going to talk about it a little bit because it is relevant.
Cool.
But we're not doing a deep dive.
Thank you.
So the Dunblane massacre took place at the Dunblane Primary School in Dunblane, which is near Stirling in Scotland, on March 13th, 1996.
Okay.
So this is just a little bit over a month before the Port Arthur massacre. 43-year-old Thomas Hamilton shot 16 children, one teacher, and then injured 15 others before killing himself. And that's the deadliest mass shooting in British history. But Paul Mullen, he referred to this, what Bryant did, as the copycat effect. Sorry, I don't know. I switch off between referring to him as Martin and Bryant. But Martin Bryant is his name.
Right. I don't know what to say because you always criticize me when I do that. You go, oh my God, it's so confusing.
He's got two first names. Ah! So, any hoodles. The copycat theory is that because of the saturation of media coverage around these things, around these are being shown in current affairs, on the news stations and radio. It's publicly being covered.
Yeah, they're bombarding you with all this horror.
That it provides instruction and perversive incentives for these dysfunctional people who want to, be copycat killers.
Yeah, disgusting.
Yeah, a coroner had found that on a report on the current affairs programs that a few months earlier, the Dunblane, I think, that it had guided one suicide and that it had led to, helped create this expectation of a massacre, which was the case of Martin, right? So just interesting food for thought.
Yeah, it's
that he was potentially trying to be a copycat. So Martin Bryant, he was judged as fit to stand trial.
Good.
And his trial began on November 7th, 1996.
Because I say vigilante justice, but I really just want them to kick the shit out of him. I don't really want them to kill him.
No, because that's not justice. We want him to fucking rot.
Yeah, I want him to be beaten the shit out of with all of his burns and then suffer.
Yeah, I agree.
For a long, long, long time.
Yep. Special place in hell for a person like him.
Yep, exactly.
There's a special place in hell for most of these people we talk about.
No kidding.
So he initially pled not guilty, but he was persuaded by his lawyer, who was court appointed to him, who was John Avery, to plead guilty. So 2 weeks later, the Hobart Supreme Court Judge, William Cox, gave him 35 life sentences. So one for every death.
Good.
And I'm not going to get into all the charges, and then an additional 1,652 years. And without the possibility of parole.
Good.
All of his sentences are to be served concurrently, which is,
at the same time.
I feel indifferent about that.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter.
Because he's not going to live, he's never getting out, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, he's not living 35 lifetimes and then 1,066 years.
Yeah, 1,652 years.
1,650, yeah, yep. So concurrent's fine.
Yeah, I just feel like concurrent sometimes, if it's sometimes when it's a sentence of
15 years.
15 years and then 8 years and blah, 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 and they're all being served concurrently. It's no, those should be served consecutively. So they're stacked instead of, all at the same time.
Yep.
But
don't disagree. But
he's going to die in prison, so it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it said that this life sentence is applied for the term of his natural life. which is good. This is also notable in this case that he didn't get the possibility of parole because he's the first killer in Australian, or I don't know if it's in Australian or just Tasmanian history, to be sentenced without the possibility of parole, even as like murder sentences allow parole after like a certain long term. Because they're about rehabilitation.
I was going to say, assuming the prisoner's rehabilitated.
Yeah. So for the first 8 months of his imprisonment, he was held in a suicide prevention cell, which was like almost solitary confinement for him. He remained in protective custody for his own safety until November of 2006, when he was moved to Hobart's Wilfred Lopes Center, which is like a mental health center. But that's neither here nor there because it's not where he is today. Just saying that, you know, he was moved there at one point. But on July 5th, 2003, an incident occurred where someone sprayed cleaning solution in his eyes. Another inmate. And then, so he was like taken to the same hospital, the Royal Hobart Hospital. I feel like he's there a lot. He spent a lot of his life in the hospital. And then on March 25th, 2007, he attempted to commit suicide by slashing his wrist with a razor blade.
Ouch.
And then on March 27th, he cut his own throat with another razor blade and was hospitalized briefly. Who does that remind you of? Who else did I talk about that was like that? The unicorn killer.
Oh, yeah.
He also tried to slit his own throat.
Yeah, but what did he do with like a fucking paperclip or some shit?
I think he also did it with a razor blade.
No, it was something that
was dull.
Yeah, it was something that wouldn't.
That was painful. That would be painful for sure, but not get the job well done.
Not life-threatening.
Yeah, well, that's same with this guy. I mean, how can you? I don't understand. It seems unnatural that you can apply that kind of force to yourself, knowing what you're going to do.
Well, plus a razor blade probably isn't going to go deep enough to get to your carotid.
Probably not.
Which is where you've got to get to.
So he's allowed to listen to music on the radio outside of his cell and is denied access to any news reports of his massacre.
That's good.
Because remember, like I said,
he lives in the glory of it.
Yeah, that he was obsessed with how many people he'd killed, like and trying to figure that out and like felt good about it.
Yeah, he wants to be part of that current affair. Look what I did. Watch me. I'm on TV.
Yeah.
And I'm going to watch me on TV.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Those fuckers. A former prison employee, he told the News Corps that Martin had spent most of his time these days eating alone, eating like 2-minute noodles and chocolate, which he got in exchange for sexual favors.
Alrighty then.
Yeah. And he had become grossly fat and declined to take part in any prison yard exercise. Another prison guard said he's got one of those stomachs that kind of hangs down between his legs. He's a huge man. He would just sit at a table on the ground floor of the unit. He was in those picnic tables that are bolted to the floor.
Gotcha.
So yeah, he just
let himself go.
He just really let himself go.
From the blonde surfer boy that you showed me?
From the blonde surfer, yeah. He does not look the same. So he's currently housed in the maximum security Risdon prison, which is near Hobart, where he grew up, right? Where he spent most of his life, besides his years traveling, most of his life. And he's 56 years old. So newspaper coverage immediately after the Port Arthur massacre, I feel like with any crime kind of questions like journalistic ethics. Like
hard eye roll over here.
Every single time, you know, something happens that's controversial or sad, a tragedy, always
gets exploited the shit out of.
Yeah.
That's why it's so random that we do this true crime podcast, because I don't watch the news.
Yeah, I don't either.
Because it's always horrible. I read what I want to read as far as news stories go, so I'm up to current, relevant. Yeah, like I know what's going on, but I don't want it in my face, all this horrible, tragic shit.
Bullshit?
Yeah.
Not bullshit, but it's just horrible shit.
Tragic shit. So I don't watch the news. But here I am.
So a lot of the Australian media was really criticized, and photos of him published in The Australian, which is like a newspaper, had his eyes digitally manipulated to make him look really bad and like deranged and just horrible, which led to like bad public trial for him. But then again, like he didn't have like really a public trial because he was sentenced by a judge.
Right. And he wasn't going to get off either way. But
yeah, he wasn't going to get off either way.
But yeah, you don't need to embellish it. He's a horrible, terrible person. You don't need to make his eyes look creepy. That's dumb.
Despite the criticism, the manipulated photographs continued to be used in the media. Of course, right? Once somebody gets a hold of them, they're just going to keep going.
Yep.
and they were still used up to a decade later. But there's a lot of questions about how these photos could have been obtained. Okay, so the Tasmanian Director of Public Prosecution warned the media that the coverage was compromised. Like I said, like Martin's right to a fair trial. And so there are basically like a lot of issues at this point then with the media in Australia, which the targeted issues or the targeted like networks, I guess, if you will, were the Australian, the Hobart Mercury, which used Martin's picture under the headline, "This is the man," the Age, and the ABC, which remember the ABC was the one that he spoke to on the phone and called himself Jamie when they were trying to gather information from local businesses about what was going on. So Australian newspapers just were basically just like ripped to shreds at this point, right?
As they should have been.
As they should have been. So at one point, one of the like higher ups in the government basically threatened to like prosecute anyone who got a hold of pictures of him inside of his cell, and that there would be like serious fucking consequences to pay if that should happen to him.
Good.
Yeah. So his right to a fair trial, right, like we just talked about, was kind of stripped away. But again, not that it matters, because I feel like justice was still served, that he's getting like a really long sentence and he's never going to get out. And he's the first person in Australian history who's being told that he's not getting out. Like it's not going to happen for him. So that's good.
It is good.
But his motivations for the massacre were the refusal of the sale by the owners of the Seascape, which were the Martin couple, right? And apparently he told his lawyer it was to become notorious. Like we talked about that he like allegedly said to his neighbor. So he allegedly told his lawyer that he wanted to become famous or infamous, I guess is the better way to describe him.
Yes.
Which this was released on the Channel 7 program called Sunday Night on Sunday, March 6th in 2016. They talked about that so, his lawyer released that stuff, that information.
Recently?
Yeah, within the last, that was 20 years. I do want to talk about some of the conspiracy theories related to this, just because I think they're important to mention because people talk about them, right? People talk about them surrounding it, which this before Sandy Hook, before that mass shooting, this was the one that had the most conspiracy theories of any mass shooting in history before Sandy Hook, right? However, none of these have been confirmed, so we're just going to like pretty quickly chug along and talk about them.
Okay.
Because they have no backing. So many cited Australian politicians making predictions that only a massacre involving dozens of fatalities would spark massive gun control legislation. And so there had to be like a number of deadly mass shootings prior to Port Arthur, right? But there weren't. And so Port Arthur.
Yeah, I feel like that's bullshit.
Yep, I feel like that's bullshit too. Several hospitals in Tasmania had put emergency plans into place days before the massacre. The helicopter pilots were readily available on the day of the massacre, and that a 22-body morgue track was recently made available in Port Arthur, and that a number of news reporters were already present for a World Press Convention. I feel like that's kind of just coincidence.
I do too. It's a weird coincidence.
The shitty coincidence.
Yeah.
But...
yeah, but
I don't feel like that's...
it doesn't make a conspiracy theory where people are going to be like, okay, we're all going to converge in this spot and we're going to have this training and we're going to have this emergency plan in place. And now all we need is a mass shooter.
Right? Let's hire him.
Yeah, no, that doesn't seem right.
No, it doesn't.
Not to mention the fact that with his mental capacity and his need to be, his ego stroked, to be noticed, he would have fucking said that that's what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have just been like, yeah, this is,
this was all me. He'd be like, no, I was sought out. I was
just this great, amazing gunman and I have the best shot ever.
Right.
I have the greatest aim in the game that they wanted to hire me to do this. I know that's not what happened.
I was sought after.
So the next conspiracy theory is kind of like a three-parter bit of it, because basically the conspiracy theory is saying that he would have been unable to do these things because of his impaired mental state, right? Like we talked about his IQ of being an 11-year-old. His IQ of 66, which is equivalent to an average 11-year-old. And anyway, that he would be able to shoot 32 people in the cafe and the gift shop with 29 gunshots in under 90 seconds.
Why not?
That's what I'm wondering. How he has this fucking semi-automatic. Is like, it was an AR Colt that he had at the time of the original gun that he brought up.
Right. Yeah. So
to be able to reload his rifle after firing 29 shots, that too, people argued that he couldn't have done that. And that he also couldn't have been able to fire from the hip because he I guess actually, did I talk about this?
you did.
That he sat down for some of them and was just very relaxed on his body the way he was shooting.
Oh, maybe you didn't say that, but I do remember you saying he shot from the hip, but I don't remember you saying that he sat down and was super relaxed.
Would have been a difficult position that required firing with his right hand, but he was left-handed.
Well, okay.
But I feel like that still doesn't have any fucking thing to do with it.
No, it has no bearing. And I think that sometimes people that are maybe somewhat mentally impaired or have a lower IQ are hyperfixated on other things. And he had an obsession with guns.
Yeah.
And
so he would have learned how to do it correctly.
Yeah, he would have learned all this stuff. And he probably would have been hyper-focused on it to learn it and learn it well.
Yeah, because he wants to be a mass shooter.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he got his wish, unfortunately. Wish he wouldn't have, but he did. So another one is that there was descriptions that people had made, right, from Port Arthur, like the survivors, people who maybe even weren't injured, but just survivors in the area that didn't match the description of Martin Bryant, of the shooter. So there's those conspiracy theories out there that they got the wrong guy.
Yeah, no, that doesn't have any bearing on it either. Because he was in the fucking...
He was in there for a total of
And he was in the seascape and set himself on fire and had a hostage and was shooting at cops.
Yeah, it's obviously him.
Yeah.
Well, on the road, all the people that saw him on the road.
Yeah, no, that's dumb.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and here's the thing, too. If you're only seeing him for a matter of seconds and you're so traumatized, your brain could also be lying to you.
Yeah, there's
about what he looks like.
There is that.
You could have such an inaccurate memory because you're seeing other things happening around you, too, that who really cares about what the gunman looks like right now?
Right.
But then you're having to give a description of him, and so you're just bullshitting.
Right.
Or making up what you thought you might have seen.
Right. But bottom line, he was in the fucking seascape and set himself on fire.
Right. Yeah. Bottom line.
Bottom line, it was him.
Bottom line, it was him.
Yeah.
We all know it was him. Our fingers are pointing at him.
Yes.
So there was evidence that didn't corroborate the details of the massacre, especially the standoff at the Seascape Cottage, which we just talked about, which I don't know what this evidence is. So that's just a fucking conspiracy theory that somebody fucking dropped one day and has zero ground to it. So whatever. Just important to mention, right? Because, I mean, there's all kinds of dumb bullshit conspiracy theories out there in this world. Like one of them that pisses me off really badly is the 9/11 and that, it was an inside job and all that.
Yeah.
I don't care whatever if it was or if it wasn't, it's horrible to believe that the government would want to kill people like that and just...
To start a war.
To start a war.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fucking horrible.
Yeah.
Whether it's true or not, whether you believe it or not, it's horrible to believe these things, so I just choose not to.
Agreed.
Because I have to live here.
Yeah. Because you want to have faith that as horrible as the government is and the shitty things they do, that they wouldn't do that. Because they also try to do some good shit.
Yep. And the last one is that there was no coronial inquiry to give Martin Bryant a trial, which is required if foreign people were killed or if there were deaths by fire, which obviously both was fulfilled.
But who died by fire?
Everyone.
Oh, being fired upon? Gunfire?
Well, maybe. Maybe that's what that means. Gunfire?
I don't know. You said fire.
Or fire, burning?
Well, fire sounds like fire.
Fire does sound like fire. Fire! Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know.
But there were foreigners.
Yeah. There were the people from Malaysia.
Yeah.
And there were people from different, states within Australia.
Yeah, there were tourists. It was a tourist town.
Yep, exactly. So, like I was saying, I'm sorry I grabbed those offline, but I just thought that they were important to mention.
Gotcha.
But with that being said, even though it's important to acknowledge them, I also want to talk about how fucking disrespectful it is, because no matter which way you shake it, if you believe the conspiracy theories, if you don't, if you think XYZ, 35 people died very senselessly. 20 plus people were injured for literally no fucking reason. It's all bullshit. I know I gave the time of day to the conspiracies for the sake of what we're doing here today for the podcast. But do I believe any of them? No, right. Absolutely not. We've done a pretty heavy deep dive into his background. It was him.
Yeah. He was at the fucking seascape and set himself on fire.
Yeah, he burned his own ass. There's proof. He was in the hospital.
Yeah.
With probably pretty serious injuries to his ass.
Yeah, and back. And he did it. He just did it. And it is disrespectful to the victims to think that somebody else got away with it or that it was a government plot or anything else.
Exactly. That's my point. That, you know, like that's the whole back to like the 9/11 thing I was just saying.
Right.
That, you know, no matter if it's founded or if it's not, I don't want to believe it. So it's just fucking senseless. 35 people lost their lives. It was horrible. Then that's basically all I really want to talk about regarding him. Because now I want to jump into the impact.
I want you to too. Also.
So, like we said, the Port Arthur massacre occurred 6 weeks after the Dunblane massacre, which the then Australian Prime Minister, John Howard, he was contacted by the then British Prime Minister, John Major, and they like just didn't expect all those people to be killed at Port Arthur or that it would exceed the number of those killed at Dunblane, and especially just the short amount of time between the two.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, where they declared like they're there for each other, basically, like gave their condolences from one nation to the next, and like the shared kind of tragedy feeling that they had, just about how horrible it was. But in 1987, there was a conference, and at this conference, so this is 8 years before the massacre, right? Or about 8 years. And following 2 mass shootings that had happened in Melbourne earlier in that year, the Premier of New South Wales, which is kind of like a prime minister, but less of a title. Like, I think I was trying to like do some research into it, but I guess, I don't know, their government, theirs to me is kind of confusing because they also have like governors and all that. I don't know. It's just very different than here.
Yes.
Obviously. Which I don't even understand our government half the time. So confusing. Anyway, Barry Unsworth said, "It will take a massacre in Tasmania before we get gun reform in Australia," because Tasmania did not want to change their gun laws. They were pretty fucking willy-nilly about everything.
Gotcha. Still, conspiracy theory does not make.
Yeah, no.
It's just irrelevant to the
It's
location of where people...
That's not a conspiracy theory.
Oh, I know, but it probably added to it.
He said a mass shooting was the only way they were going to change their laws. Like, this is the only way, like, we're going to get them to fucking do something about this gun issue we're having.
Right, but don't you think that that contributes to some of those conspiracy theories, is that people knew that he said that?
Maybe. I mean, perhaps, but, like, they're saying that this is an inside job, so in that way the gun reform had to change.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I guess, but again, that's just because I don't want to believe that the government would do that to their people.
Right, exactly.
And Martin Bryant probably would have fucking been, again, like you said, bolstering, and like his head would have just inflated like 200 times bigger than his body, talking about how great he is and that he's the best marksman and like all this shit.
Right.
You know?
And from what you just said, the whole rest of Australia wanted gun reform, and Tasmania was the holdout to that.
Yeah.
And so they were like more like the Wild West, maybe?
Yeah, perhaps.
Or maybe not the Wild West, but they were not they weren't into gun control, bottom line.
So again, they had this meeting. All of the states and territories of Australia had come and had this conversation about, you know, gun reform again in 1995. Again, it had been rejected by Tasmania. But following the spree, the Prime Minister of Australia, John Howard, he was the Prime Minister at this time still. Not still, we just talked about that earlier. Duh. He was the Prime Minister at this time, sorry. So he led the development of the strict gun laws within Australia and formulated the National Firearms Agreement, which then the UK, a year after they had like a change of government, also followed suit in the same laws, which is kind of cool. That I guess they just like declared they've got each other's backs from that point forth, which is great.
It is great.
So due to the weapons that were used in the massacre and the fact that Martin Bryant, who had a violent history, and it was known that he had a violent history regardless of the mental disability and all of these things that we've talked about, that he may or may not have been schizophrenic. People noted the signs of schizophrenia, but he never really was proven XYZ. You know, they knew he had a violent history because of things he had done. Was able to purchase and get guns easily and legally, even like in some of the cases that he did get some of these guns legally, and he had an easy time obtaining them, right? So the Australian government established new laws that heavily restricted the availability of these firearms. Legal ownership of the self-loading rifles, or legal ownership, I'm sorry, and the use of self-loading rifles, self-loading shotguns, pump-action shotguns were banned. Some guns were heavily restricted, and gun owners had to apply for a license to provide a genuine reason beyond their personal protection for owning a gun. And so they basically instilled this buyback program, which was initiated by this protection order, right, from the government of taking away not necessarily taking away the guns, but buying them back. It was an incentivized program by the government, which more than 640,000 firearms were handed back.
Wow.
And so
that's a lot.
The government handed out $350 million in total for the guns.
Wow.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, people are getting money back for their guns, right? And it's
It
an
is
incentive
great. Well, yeah, to incentivize it so that people do it.
And all of these guns were melted down that they collected.
Nice.
So, however, of course, like anything controversial, there's controversy over the new gun laws. There were fringe groups such as the Aussie Freedom Scouts, the Australian League of Rights, and the Citizen-Initiated Referendum Party, which didn't want these changes. They loudly expressed their that they were against the changes to the gun laws. They didn't want them. However, they were passed anyway since the Christian Coalition, and get this, you'll never guess who else backed them.
That foundation.
What foundation?
The Atlanta and...
Well, I'm sure they did too, but no. This one's really out there.
Then I won't guess.
I think you should. It's totally... The NRA, our NRA in the United States, backed and supported this lobbying attempt for the reform of guns in Australia.
Wow.
Isn't that insane?
That is insane.
I don't know if they were hoping to buy back the guns. Well, I feel like the NRA, what I know of them is that they're very for people having guns for protection, not everyone owning an AR-15 to go have mass shootings all the time. They're for responsible gun ownership.
Yes, exactly.
So this buyback program cut the firearm suicides in the country by 74%.
Wow.
And saved, on average, about 200 lives every year since then. And since the Port Arthur massacre in 1996, Australia has not had a single mass shooting.
Nice.
So even though it happened and it sucks, it made a big impact, which,
huge.
Is huge. I don't want to say sometimes it does take tragedy for some things to reform, though. I guess that's what I want to say about it.
Yeah.
So the Port Arthur historic site was eventually reopened and a new restaurant was built. And then the Broad Arrow Cafe, where most of the victims were shot, right, and the gift shop next door, was turned into a memorial.
Good.
And the community at Port Arthur also established a kinship with the town of Dunblane, which, was still reeling from the massacre. And the two communities, they offered aid to each other and services and, trying to, have their respective memorials for all of their victims. So at the Port Arthur Memorial, there's a nice garden and there's a cross and a plaque, both of which the cross has every victim's name. The plaque, it's missing the name of Raymond Sharp. I'm not sure why, but he was one of the Sharp brothers, right? So he's listed on the plaque that's attached to the cross, but not on the dedication plaque. And he was 67 years old. The front inscription of the plaque reads, "May we who come to this garden cherish life for the sake of those who died. Cherish compassion for the sake of those who gave aid. Cherish peace for the sake of those in pain." And then the left side inscription says, "Death has taken its toll. Some pain knows no release, but the knowledge of brave compassion shines like a pool of peace."
I like it.
Really
It
sad.
sucks that had to happen, but the memorial is very nice.
So the plaque itself is called the Port Arthur Memorial Garden. It was dedicated, and this is on it, by His Excellency the Honorable Sir William Dean, AC KBE, Governor General of the Commonwealth of Australia. The monument dedication date was April 28th of 2000. And the listed victims on the plaque, I'm sorry, we're going to do this.
Why?
Because it's important to acknowledge them.
I know, but I just finished editing the last episode and I heard all of this. It's very sad.
There was 72-year-old David and 69-year-old Nolene or Sally Martin, the couple who owned the Seascape Cottage. William, I don't know, I don't want to butcher it, and So Lang Chung. William was 48 and So Lang Chung was 32, and they were visiting from Malaysia. Kate Scott, who was 21, who was about to start her new job. Anthony Nightingale, who was 48. The one brother, Kevin Sharp, who was 68. and their friend, 66-year-old Walter Bennett, and Kevin was killed while shielding his wife.
Mm-hmm.
There was Andrew Mills, who was 49, Tony Kiston, who was 51, and he was the Salvation Army officer, and he passed away in the arms of his wife, and he told her that he was going to go be in the arms of the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah Lawton, who was 15, and her mom tried to protect her. Mervyn Howard, who was 55, and his wife Mary, who was 57, and they were active members in their small community. They were well respected. They were avid churchgoers. He was a secretary of the Ballarat Football League for 14 years, and they had 5 children.
Mm-hmm.
Nicole Burgess, who was 17, and Elizabeth Howard, who was 26, and they worked at the gift shop. Gwen Neander, who was 67. Jason Winter, who was 28, and he was the winemaker from New Zealand and a father who was helping out the people at the cafe that day. Peter Nash, who was 32, and he was gunned down while guarding his wife from a bullet. Dennis Lever, who was 53, and he was the local jewelry store owner, and he died just trying to protect his loved ones. And there was that video with all of the stuff around his shop after he passed away, and it was so sad. Ronald Jari, who was 71, and he was a retired fruit grower, and people spoke about how nice and kind he was again on those interviews with all of his neighbors. They just talked about what an amazing person he was. Pauline Masters, who was 49, Janet Quinn, who was 50, and she and her husband owned a wildlife park on the east coast of Tasmania. Alva Gaylord, who was 48, Winifred Alpin, who was 58, Royce Thomas, who was 59, Nanette Micak and her children, Madeline, who was 3, and Alana, who was 6, and the Alana and Madeline Foundation and the beautiful impact it's made, which I'm just going to go through those really quick stats again.
Okay, quickly.
Yes.
Quick stats.
Well, it's important and it's huge. And
it is huge. I just,
well,
just keep going.
It's amazing because as of when the last time we recorded this.
Last week.
Yeah, the first recording, the part 2 we made. Mm-hmm. 29,313 children had benefited from support with dealing with trauma. 1,876 children have had a safe and supportive space in the Cubby House from the foundation, which the Cubby House is a safe haven for children and young people at the Melbourne and Broadmeadows Children's Courts. They've educated 2,580 children and young people through digital schools. They've delivered 114,000 buddy bags to children and young people in a time of crisis, and those buddy bags provide essential materials for a child who may have nothing more than the clothes they are wearing.
I like that they do it, but I hate it when you say that they might not have anything more than what they're wearing. It just makes me so sad.
Well, that's what it says on their website.
I know.
That's what it says on the foundation page. And so I'm just taking it right from them.
I know.
Because they're the great people out there doing the work.
It makes me so sad.
Mary Rose Nixon, who was 60, Russell James Pollard, who was 72, Helen, who was 50, and Robert Salisman, who was 57, Zoe Hall, who was 28, and she was a Sydney solicitor. She was in Tasmania for her friend's birthday, and people said she lived for everything, and then her boyfriend, Glenn Pears, who was 35. And at the 20th anniversary memorial of the massacre, 500 people attended it. So it's had a really big impact. And that's all I've got.
Thank God. I'm sorry. Just like,
I didn't want to. I mean, I know I spent a long time talking about him, obviously, because I had to. But I also saw this thing about people saying that, they refuse to say his name in Australia.
Good.
Which I think is great and awesome. I mean, for what we're doing here today, we have to say his name, right?
Yeah.
But from now on, we're not going to say his name. We'll call him that fuckface.
Okay.
Yo, that fuckface.
Yo, that Australian fuckface. So
Yeah.
we know which fuckface.
The poor Arthur fuckface.
Yeah, that way we know which fuckface we're referring to.
Right, exactly.
Because there are a lot of fuckfaces.
There's so many fuckfaces. There is an infinite amount of fuckfaces.
That is so very true.
All right, well, that's all I got. It's so sad. I'm sorry.
It is very sad.
We can wrap up.
Thank
I
you.
think that's all. But you can follow us on Instagram at That's Disturbing Podcast and send us a DM of what you want us to cover. And send us a Gmail, that's disturbingpodcast@gmail.com. And I will try not to depress anyone anymore for the rest of my life.
Nice.
I don't know how well that's going to work with our podcast. But
Yeah, I know.
I'll attempt it. I'll do my best.
I just think some are some of them hit you in a different way. It's not that they're worse than others because they're all tragic.
They're all horrible and bad. Some of them just...
They hit you in a different way.
Right.
You know, like you just saying that they may only have the clothes on their back. Like, it's great that this foundation helps them, but those words coming out of your mouth that these kids only have the clothes on their back makes me really sad.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole
agree.
thing, like, I don't know why I specifically just gravitate towards that for the tragedy. Not the tragedy of the Port Arthur thing, but just like overall.
Well, it's the impact it had, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, nothing that happened here was good.
No.
But some of the things that came out of it were good, like this foundation that's helped so many children, like the gun reform and that there's been no more mass shootings in Australia.
That's amazing.
And
that is amazing.
the suicide rate by gun has been cut by 74%.
That is also amazing.
Like, that's incredible.
Yeah, incredible.
Really incredible.
All right, back to your sign off.
Bye-bye.